Welcome to Shamblefest!
I'm Jess.
I'm Amber, and we are your one-stop weekly shop for news shambles.
We're a weekly WTF and current events comedy podcast. We drop episodes every Monday morning. Tune in.
Shamble on!
Warning! This circulating content that is not suitable for kids like me.
Welcome to Crime Crazy, the weekly true crime podcast with Eryn Plime and
Erica Schultz,
where we prove that we know nothing about our legal system, but we're still crazy for a good true crime story. Also fairly certain that's the first time I've ever said the whole thing on my own. So we have a new special person this week and a brand new friend to me who I met 10 minutes ago. So Erica, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us like anything?
Sure. So I'm Erica, and I host a podcast called Customers Also Watched, which is how I met Eryn through the Lady Pod Squad. Yes. And so mine just basically covers B movies on Amazon Prime, and most of them tend to be horror. And I am a fan of true crime myself, and as Eryn and I were talking about before we started. And so I jumped at the chance when she said she was looking for a co-host this week.
Yes. She literally just like last minute appeal, somebody come record, like things fell through and she was like, oh yeah, no, I got this. I'm ready. I've got a story. We're good to go. So thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
All right. So I hear that you have learned something this week so that you could share.
Yes, I did actually. So spoiler, my story that I'm going to tell this week actually takes place in Norway.
Ooh.
And my husband and I are actually going there in July for our combined 40th birthdays. So I've been reading up on the country, and I thought this fun fact was fitting. Plus, it has to do with death, so I guess even more fitting.
Norway, death, we're good.
So, yeah. So I learned that it is forbidden to die in the Arctic town of Longyearbyen, and I'm sure I butchered that,
cool.
In Norway's Svalbard Islands. So forbidden to die.
I have so many questions.
I'm going to explain, so maybe that'll answer it for you. So the town's small graveyard stopped accepting bodies 70 years ago after it was discovered that they were failing to decompose.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so they can't bury any more people there because of the permafrost. Right. So if you are terminally ill and going into hospice, or they will actually ship you off somewhere else because they say, no, you can't die here.
So you can't be buried there, but you also can't die there.
Technically, if you die by an accident, if it happens suddenly, then they will ship your body somewhere else.
So my real question is, how do you enforce this? What are you going to do? They're kind of dead.
Well, I think so. Apparently there's only about 1,500 people that work there. So I'm pretty sure that everyone there is probably okay with it, because if they just kept burying people there, they would run out of room.
Right.
And, if they're not, I think the Norwegians are much more earthy than most are. And so they probably think like, yes, that body should go into the ground and decompose. Right. Circle of life kind of thing. So I don't think that they have too many people who are objecting and saying no. And it's been in place for 70 years. So I don't think anyone's coming along now and, protesting it. Right. So
I mean, I would sort of just hope that no one would do that anyway. Like, that's a really petty thing but that is such a strain. Like, it makes complete sense. But what a weird thing to have a law about.
Yeah, it is. I guess actually scientists recently, within the last 10 years or so, actually removed some tissue from a man who did die there. And they found traces of the influenza virus, which wiped out a bunch of people back in the early 20th century.
Wow. Because he's just still perfectly preserved and you can do that.
Yeah.
That also is creepy, actually, to think about.
Yeah.
But how interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well, my thing I learned is also about death. So
okay.
But it's not location specific, it's cause of death specific. And has something to do with my story. So we'll just continue on this happy theme. So I researched a little bit about carbon monoxide poisoning and how it actually kills you, which I knew a little bit about, but like, I don't know, it was really fascinating. So basically, if you are exposed to either lots and lots of low doses of carbon monoxide over a long period of time or a whole bunch all at once, the carbon monoxide will bond to your hemoglobin and your red blood cells, but it does so more efficiently than oxygen would. So it takes the place of what your red blood cells are actually wanting, which is the oxygen. And so you kind of suffocate, really, because your body can't get enough. You become hypoxic and your body doesn't have enough oxygen, and it's as if you are not breathing properly. But the things that I didn't really know are if I lock myself in the garage and I turn on the car, or like if I'm warming up my car in the garage and I don't open the garage door and I'm sitting out there and I am exposed to a lot of carbon monoxide all at once, or have, something wrong in my home or whatever, the symptoms are very flu-like at first. And so you might not even realize that that's what's going on. It's more like, I don't feel well. I'm kind of dizzy. I would like to lie down now. But then you can quickly slip into unconsciousness and then coma and then death. And then you get that like bright pink lips and pale skin kind of look, which I don't know if I feel like I have seen this in every episode of Law and Order, right? Where they come across a body and they're like, right. Oh, had to be carbon monoxide, because it's a very telltale look.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually tried to get that look without dying, like pale skin.
Yeah, no,
lips.
it's kind of a thing. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't suggest this as a method of obtaining that. That just, it doesn't bode well.
Hard pass.
Yeah. But even a little bit of exposure over a long period of time, it attacks like just the minimal amount of hypoxia. So not having enough oxygen in your blood over a long period of time will attack your organs, and you can have organ failure and all of that. And it can be years and years and years, and then it'll eventually kill you. So horrible stuff. I would recommend avoiding it at all costs in any sort of quantity.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try to avoid that. That's like long-term exposure though, right?
Yeah. And I didn't look at like what concentration it would have to be over how long, but it was talking about like maybe if you work somewhere where there's a lot of carbon monoxide and it's higher than a healthy level but not so high that you'll notice. So like maybe if you are mining, or if you work in a really poorly ventilated mechanic shop or something like that, it'll just catch up with you many years down the road. If you are in an area where it is super, super concentrated and it's like that instant, it only takes minutes to kill you. Yeah. Yeah. It's terrifying because like you wouldn't be able to get out.
So many forms of creeping death.
Right? Yeah. No, it's kind of amazing that we are all alive, actually. There are lots of things that can kill you. So it sounds like we both have super happy stories this week.
Oh, yeah. Mine is definitely up there.
Awesome. Well, would you like to tell yours first? I'm so excited to hear it. It's my favorite part of the podcast is listening to the other person's stories.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm happy to go first. So I'll just get right into it. So, as I said, my story takes place in Norway, and it actually centers around members of the black metal music scene in the early 90s. I thought this would be topical for this, considering there's actually a movie out right now called Lords of Chaos, which, you know, it's not really a docudrama by any means, or a biopic. It's sort of retelling the story. There is actually a book of the same name, Lords of Chaos, which came out in 1998, and it's a very thick read. So if you want like a short, sweet version, there's a movie out there for you.
And did you just see it recently?
I did. I actually, my husband and I just saw it last night.
I was super excited to ask. How was it?
So he enjoyed it more than I did. I think so. Rory Culkin, Macaulay Culkin's little brother, is in it, and he plays one of the main characters, Euronymous. That's EURO, Nimus. And I think he did a really great job. I think what took me out of the movie was that, you know, they're in Norway. They filmed it there, so the setting is perfect. But then you have these American actors, and I really wanted, like, they needed to speak English, but I wanted Norwegians speaking English. So it kind of took me out of it just hearing Americans.
Yeah.
Also, there was like this, Culkin's character was doing narration over a lot of the movie, sort of explaining things, which I get is probably necessary for people unfamiliar with the story, but it just took me out of it, quite a bit of it. And just knowing about the story, I know it was, you know, they took a lot of liberties with a lot of things, and I don't really feel like they painted a good picture of who these people are, because there are no good people in this story. Like, there's no one to root for.
Right.
In it. I mean, they kind of made Euronymous sympathetic, I guess. But really, like, you know, there's no one to root for in it, which is kind of hard to do in a movie. Like, you need someone to root for.
Yeah, I was going to say that would not translate well in any kind of, You need somebody to be in their head. Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, I'd recommend it to people who, if the story I tell seems somewhat interesting to you, I am going to spoil the movie for you if you do decide to see it with this. But I think people who don't know the story would probably enjoy it more than I did.
Right.
I guess is my main takeaway.
Right. So for entertainment, not bad. For accuracy and okay. That's fair.
So
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Fun fact, there was also a criminal group of teenagers in Florida in 1996 who called themselves the Lords of Chaos. And a lot of people actually presume that's where the title of the book came from, even though there's not really a direct connection. Right. But that Florida teen gang thing is a whole other, like, true crime story on its own. So I'm not going to get into that.
Did they take the name from this, or was it just a coincidence, or...
So the book came out in 98, and the teen group was in 96. So a lot of people think that the author of the book actually took that name and was like, oh, that's a good name for this book, because the kids in Florida were all like metal kids and stuff like that. So yeah, but that's a whole other potentially other episode for
there
you.
We go.
I didn't delve too far into that one because I was like, I don't know.
Well, right, not related.
Up on that right now.
Fair.
Yeah. So before I get into the specifics of the story, I do want to give some sort of context for what black metal is, because I feel like it's one of the lesser known genres of the subgenres rather of metal. So there's like, you know, so many different types, and there's this really long spectrum, and, you know, on the ones on the opposite end couldn't be more different. Right. So this is very, very oversimplified. So if you have any like heavy metal fans listening, I apologize in advance. You know, give me a break. So basically, like on on one end of the spectrum, you have what you might call like glam or hair metal. This is sort of that poppy and safe, safe for MTV during regular hours when they actually played music videos back in my day. An example would be Poison, singing like Unskinny Bop. So then you get towards the middle, and there's some more familiar bands like Metallica and Anthrax and Slayer. And then as you move even further along the spectrum, you'll get into genres like prog metal and deathcore. And then at the very far end of the spectrum, black metal is one of those subgenres over there.
So we're talking intense.
Yeah. So subject matter is, and it takes a lot from other genres, but it really started coming out in the 80s and then obviously gained notoriety in the 90s after this whole incident that I'm going to talk about happened. So as far as black metal goes, the band Mayhem was one, if not the first, of Norway's black metal bands, and the events of this story revolve around that band in particular. So many people associate black metal with Satanism, and while that may be true for some, many are simply just anti-Christian or pagans, really they're just kind of anti any religion, especially those which took part in destroying Norse paganism specifically. But bands like Mayhem never actually disputed the fact that they were Satanists, because it kind of boded well for their reputation, just like sex sells, so does Satan. So they fully embraced it publicly, and they even did other things to kind of play up that image as well, and were sure to tell people about it. So they did, there's another documentary about black metal called Until the Light Takes Us. It came out in 2010. And they did an interview with one of the members who went by the stage name Hellhammer. It's going to be a lot of fun names in this story.
I'm excited.
So according to an interview with Hellhammer, one of the members of Mayhem and the lead singer, whose name was Dead, would wear clothes that he buried. I know. He would wear clothes that he'd buried in the ground until they were rotten and filled with bugs.
Oh, that sounds really awful.
Yeah.
Just physically uncomfortable.
I would imagine so. I guess he would also wear corpse paint, which is like the, white face, black eyes, dripping sort of look. A lot of people think of like Alice Cooper kind of makeup, but they did it more to be sort of like inspired. They said that it was inspired by the plague, but it's not like they were the first people to paint their faces. Right. So, Kiss was doing it, and I'm not going to, attribute it to, or try and make a connection there, because I'm sure black metal fans would revolt if I mentioned Kiss or whatever. I think one other thing that Hellhammer said that they did was, or not they, but Dead, the lead singer, he would inhale a plastic bag that had a decayed bird in it so he could, quote, get the stench of death before every song.
How do you not vomit? Like, oh my gosh. I'm just thinking about like driving down the road and there's roadkill. And you hold your breath because gross. And to do that intentionally?
Yeah, I know.
No,
not at all. Like anytime we drive somewhere and I'm like, oh, it's skunk. Yeah. Oh, it's like, yeah, you're holding back the vomit.
Right, so. Right. Like, how long can I hold my breath? I don't want to black out while I'm driving, but I don't want to smell the skunk.
Yeah. So, Dead was definitely kind of more on the extreme side of it, and also suffered from severe depression. Right. He would physically cut himself on stage, like deep, not just like, quick cuts or whatever. Like, he cut himself really deep on stage. Over a period of many different shows. So he eventually had like all these scars on his arm. So now that you have some sort of basic background info about that band and Norway, I'm going to sort of just jump right into the story itself.
I'm a little
so
terrified.
Like I said,
just,
it's rough. So like I said, Dead suffered from severe depression, and on April 8th, 1991, he took a shotgun to his head and killed himself when he was home alone. he actually wrote a suicide note, which simply read, "Excuse all the blood."
Oh.
Yeah. So Hellhammer and Euronymous, who were his bandmates, they found his body, and his brain and tissue and blood were kind of splattered all over the place. And what's the first thing you do when you find a dead body, Eryn?
Well, in my vast experience, I probably, after I panicked, I would call 911 or the equivalent for my country. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I am very concerned about what choice they made after you asked that question.
So, yeah, Euronymous did not do that. I mean, he did eventually, but his first reaction was to get a camera and snap photos.
Oh, no.
And, yeah, so he actually would later use one of those photos as a cover art for one of their albums called Dawn of the Black Hearts.
Oh, my God.
It's out there. You can, if you Google Mayhem, Dawn of the Black Hearts, you will see the picture.
Oh,
it's out there. So, for those of you who are that morbid.
So that will not be our cover art for this episode, I promise, guys. That's a lot.
Yeah, I would not recommend that. It is. It does get a little bit worse, but I'm going to tell you right now, the next part of this is there's no actual proof that this part happened. Many speculate this is merely a story to tell to make them seem more extreme or Satanist or deplorable or whatever. But according to Hellhammer, Euronymous also took pieces of Dead's brain and put them into a stew and ate it. And Hellhammer said that he didn't eat any of it, but that he did take some of Dead's skull fragments and make a necklace out of it. So, no proof, though.
Right. But that totally would be, that would be the story that you would have to tell in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think so, yeah. So, Dead is dead, but Mayhem carries on. And in the early 90s, Euronymous also owned a record store called Helvete, or Hell translated to English, in Oslo, and it became this sort of base camp for the black metal movement. And so from that base camp, Euronymous sort of became like the unofficial leader of the scene, and he was always talking to people that were visiting there, trying to incite them towards violence. One of the guitarists for another band, a black metal band called Emperor, his name was Samas, said, quote, "We all hung out and talked about our hatred for Christianity and how to get the Viking religion back. The inner circle despised Christianity, so we talked about the idea of setting fire to wooden churches, a source of pride for Norwegian Christianity," unquote. You know where this is going, right? So between 1992 and 1996, there were roughly 50 burnings or attempted burnings of wooden churches in Norway. The first and probably most famous church was Fantoft Stave.
You nailed it. That's beautiful. Great job.
And that took place in Bergen on June 6, 1992. So no one was convicted for the arson of this church, but Varg Vikernes, who's going to become a major player in this story, and Varg is the Norse word, or Norwegian word for wolf. So Varg Vikernes, he had this one-man band called Burzum, and he was one of the most vehement opposers of Christianity in that sort of inner circle of people. He was strongly suspected. Now, after the church burnings had been going on for a while, he actually wanted to bring more attention to both himself, his music, and the black metal scene as a whole. So in early 1993, he actually met with a journalist in Bergen and gave what he thought was going to be an anonymous confession to the arsons.
Oh,
He's so dumb.
That's so, wow.
Yeah. So not only was he, anonymously confessing to the arsons, he also gave information about a murder that took place in Lillehammer the previous year. It wasn't one that he committed, but it was somebody else in the circle, and I'll give the details about that as well.
And that person is going, dude, you're an idiot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So obviously, you know, the journalist did not publish it anonymously. It brought the attention of the police. Vikernes later tried to say, oh, the journalist is lying. I'm like, you fucking idiot. You went to them yourself. Like, you contacted them. So that's on him. So unfortunately, the police didn't actually have any physical evidence to hold Vikernes. And so after he was questioned and released by the police, Euronymous predicted that he would do something even more bold for publicity. And, you know, Euronymous was worried that this would keep drawing more and more police attention to his shop. And so Euronymous allegedly confided to some in that inner circle that Vikernes should be killed. Oh, God. Though whether he was joking or not is up for debate. We'll never know, because less than 2 months later, Euronymous was found dead in his apartment.
Oh, okay. That was not what I was expecting.
All right. So August 10th, 1993, Vikernes and a friend, Blackthorn, told you, fun names, they drove from Bergen to Oslo. Vikernes was supposed to meet with Euronymous to sign a new record contract. And after Vikernes arrived at the apartment of Euronymous, the two got in an argument and a physical struggle. Now, according to Vikernes, he stabbed Euronymous multiple times in the apartment and then in the head after he had fled down the stairs. The autopsy for Euronymous showed that he suffered 23 stab wounds, 2 to the head, 5 to the neck, and 16 to the back.
Ooh. Yeah, it's really hard to say that's like a self-defense or a like two-way fight when you're, Yeah, and he actually, Vikernes professed self-defense at his trial. He said that he thought Euronymous was going to kill him. He came after me first. And yeah, when you've got 16 stab wounds to the back, that doesn't look like self-defense. No, not so much, no.
Especially when it's 23 stab wounds. It's a little excessive.
Also, I feel like it would be physically exhausting, right? 23?
Yeah.
That's a lot. I get tired of like cutting things when I'm cooking.
Right. And they actually show this scene in the movie, and it's brutal. Like, they don't hold back on it, so that's in there. But, you know, so he professed self-defense, and which, like we said, doesn't make sense given all the stab wounds to the back. But what also doesn't make sense is that when he drove to Oslo with his friend, Blackthorn said that Vikernes brought 3 knives, a bayonet, an axe, and a baseball bat in the trunk of his car. So if that doesn't scream premeditated,
premeditated and keeping my options open, like it's a lot of variety.
Yeah, it's like he's holding a bat in one hand and the bayonet in the other. He's like, I'm gonna go with the knife.
I'm feeling like, wow.
So then, after the murder, according to Blackthorn, on the ride back to Bergen, he and Vikernes stopped at a lake where Vikernes took off his clothes, washed the blood out of his hair and his hands and his face, cleaned the knife, and tied up his bloody clothes around a rock and threw it in the lake and let it sink. But apparently Vikernes was still worried because he'd left the record contract that he'd gone there to sign in the apartment. With the day's date signed. Oh my God. And he had also forgotten to wear gloves. So, pro tip, if you're going to go murder someone, you probably want to bring gloves.
He had everything else. Like, it was halfway well thought out.
Almost. So, not surprisingly, Vikernes gets arrested 9 days later, charged with the murder of Euronymous after his fingerprints are found at the scene. As well as 3 charges of arson, 1 charge of attempted arson, and theft. So the prosecution had witnesses who testified that Varg had burned the churches, and on top of the physical evidence and testimony about the murder of Euronymous, Vikernes was found guilty on all charges. So in mid-1994, he was sentenced to 21 years in prison, which is actually Norway's maximum penalty.
Interesting.
Yeah. They have a, And it's still in place today. So they have a maximum penalty of 21 years. But if the authorities don't feel that you are fit to be released, they can indefinitely add 5 years, 2 years.
Okay, I feel like I actually may have come across that in another case. So do you know if that's true for just crimes where you've gotten the maximum penalty, or if it's true of any crime? Like, could I go to prison or jail for like shoplifting and then you just keep adding 5 years?
I don't know, actually. I would think that, they would apply that kind of across the board. That would seem to make the most sense. But I don't know, actually. I didn't find that
right.
out.
And I never even thought to look, because I feel like we had a case that was like that, but I haven't ever thought to look it up. But that would be really interesting to know if it's like a certain level, whatever their felony or capital equivalent would be, or...
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's not quite the end of Varg's story yet.
No.
I know. So, gonna sidetrack for a minute to talk about a couple other people in that circle who were also arrested. So Blackthorn, the guy who accompanied Varg, was sentenced to 8 years for being an accomplice. And another guy, Faust, from the band Emperor, was also arrested, and he was the one who committed the murder that Vikernes told the journalist about.
Okay.
So
he's mad.
He is mad, but when he was arrested after the interview, he showed absolutely no remorse. Oh. Like, there were bandmates in Emperor that said Faust had always been sort of fascinated with serial killers and always wanted to know what it was like to kill a person. So what happened, and this is probably the most upsetting part of the story, in August of 1992, Faust was in Lillehammer, and that was when the Olympics were actually going on there at the time. And he said that he was propositioned by Magne Andreasen. I really apologize if I butchered that name. And he was a man who was gay, and Faust followed him into a forest and stabbed him multiple times. Ugh. Yeah.
Just probably to see what it was like.
Yeah. Like, he even admitted, like, I did it because he was gay and I wanted to see what it was like to murder someone.
That kind of person is like the most terrifying kind of person, in my opinion. Like, that, just that. Yeah. I have absolutely no human empathy, and I'm curious, and why not? Kind of, because how do you fix that? That's not, it's not there's no reason.
Yeah, you can't, I don't know that you can fix that. What's even worse is that, 2 days after that murder, apparently he had told Vikernes and Euronymous about it, and to celebrate, they decided to go burn down a chapel near the Olympic ski jump in Lillehammer, called the Holmenkollen chapel. So, yeah. But thanks, I guess, to Varg's confession, Faust did finally get arrested, even though it was a year later.
Right.
And like I said, he showed absolutely no remorse. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 14 years in prison, but he was released in 2003 after only serving 9.
And I when he was like their definitions are slightly different than ours, but that sounds like not manslaughter. Like, that sounds like a maybe even premeditated, like, murder one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, like, how it played out in the courtroom, as far as, like, maybe his lawyer, like, I don't know. I don't know how that turned into manslaughter, unfortunately. But when he was released, he still was in the music scene, and there was actually a lot of backlash about him rejoining the band Emperor for, like, an anniversary tour, which, I mean, is good. But people were protesting.
Yeah, that's icky.
And apparently he was still making music up until 2014, which is the last info that I could find on him. He did appear in that documentary I mentioned, Until the Light Takes Us, back in 2010, but his voice was disguised and image was blurred out. So my guess is that he knows how much people fucking hate him and probably fears for his life.
I mean,
so,
good. I
yeah.
I would like to have more sympathy
like
for
I said,
everyone, but no, good.
No, I told you that I was like, there is no sympathetic people in this story. So
it's just, wow.
Yeah. So back to Vikernes. So during his imprisonment, he continued to make music, but he also disassociated himself with black metal and instead decided to focus efforts on becoming a proponent of neo-Nazism.
Of course. That sounds great.
Yeah. Excuse me. So he wrote multiple books about Viking folklore and his own ideologies. And he even developed this cult following and received hundreds of letters from fans, you know, much like Ted Bundy, Charles Manson. Then in August 2003, he was transferred from a maximum security prison to a low security prison. And in October of that year, I guess like they let you go out on like outside visits and on some sort of leave because he actually went on the run and escaped while he was out on one of these leaves. Yeah. And
I feel like we should see that.
He stopped a car. It's like, why would you? Yeah, I know. Maybe they learned their lesson. Maybe they don't let people do that anymore. I don't know. But so he stopped a car with a family in there who said that he hijacked their car at gunpoint. Oh. But less than 24 hours later, the police stopped the car and arrested him. In the car, they found knives, a gas mask, camouflage, a portable GPS navigator, maps, a compass, a laptop, and a mobile phone. And they also found a handgun and an automatic rifle in a nearby cabin where he had been hiding during his escape. So
well prepared.
The police basically concluded, I know. So the police basically concluded that his escape was, you know, obviously he had some assistance from the outside, probably from his cult following. Right. So 13 months were added to his sentence. And he was moved back to a high security prison, which is where he remained until 2009, when he was released from prison on parole, serving only 16 years out of his 21-year sentence. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, he's not done being a jerk yet, though. So he continued to, after he was released, release music and write, but he didn't stay out of legal trouble. In 2013, Vikernes and his wife were arrested in France on suspicion of planning acts of terrorism after his wife bought 4 rifles. Now, they weren't charged, they got released, but Vikernes was instead charged by French authorities with inciting racial hatred against Jews and Muslims and was convicted of it in 2014. But he didn't go to jail for that. He just got probation and a fine of, I think it was like 8,000 euros, which I feel like that's extremely generous.
Yeah, I think I just always assume that like we are the worst ones at this kind of thing. Like the United States like just does a really bad job with a lot of sentences. But I don't know if it's comforting or horrifying to hear that.
Yeah. I think it's both. I think it's equally both. So, after that, in 2015, Vikernes released his own tabletop role-playing game.
Oh, no.
Named, called Myfarog, Myfarog, Mythical Fantasy Role-Playing Game, which is based upon, quote, European values, geography, prehistory, mythology, traditions, and morals, and offers the player the opportunity to play a game in accordance with your own European nature. Unquote.
Wow.
It sounds like some Richard Spencer D&D or something. Like, it's just, what the fuck? So finally, more recently, Vikernes has actually become a prolific YouTuber.
Oh my god.
He is, I know, he's espousing his nonsense on multiple short videos. He's been doing so a lot more frequently because that movie has come out. And his last upload as of this recording was just over a week ago on his channel.
And I'm sure people watch it.
Yeah, he has over 220,000 subscribers.
Oh, guys, come on. We can do better.
I know. I made the mistake of reading through some of the comments, and it just made it so much worse. Oh, I'm
sure.
I was just like, yeah. So it's, yeah. So, yeah, he's a convicted murderer, is YouTubing and professing hate out there.
Hey, YouTube. We would be okay if you wanted to shut him down. Like,
totally okay with that.
not generally into the whole censorship, but you know, this would be okay. I feel like there's an exception. Wow. Yeah. Quality human being.
Indeed. So, but yeah, like I said, like there's no heroes in this
No,
one.
really not. He was impressively like, criminally prolific. Every time I thought, oh wow, this is like the end of it, and no, there was more.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
No,
so how old is he?
He is actually in his late 40s, because he was born in 1973. Right. He's only 6 years older than me, so yeah, he's 46, 47.
Yeah, that's not. He might have a lot of life left. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Which is really unfortunate.
Right. Well, and it gives him so much opportunity to do so much worse than YouTube. And I feel like the lesson that he has probably learned best is there just aren't that many consequences. Wasn't all that bad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unfortunately.
Interesting. So I was trying to think in the very beginning when you were talking about like the suicide and then the album art kind of thing, before things, this is going to sound awful, before things got dark. I feel like he probably would have approved of the use of his suicide, that being that the suicide note was pardon the blood or whatever.
Yeah. I think he definitely would have been okay with that for sure. But yeah. Does your story have a hero?
No. But my story has far fewer characters. And actually is probably one that is very familiar, and because it's been in the news lately so much. Yeah. Because I'm going to talk about throwing my notes across the room. I'm going to talk about Conrad Roy, although Michelle Carter would be the name that everyone... Oh, I know that story, right. Because our 4th season, I am going to always have a threat. Like, I feel like this season has been so against us, but I am determined to continue that thread connecting all of my stories. So last week... ish was a story about a false confession, but it was also about a teenager who murdered another child, essentially. Children who kill people freak me out so much. Like that's very much in line with that, like people who hurt other people because they're curious and have no empathy or moral compass and they just don't care.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you do that as a child, especially as like a teenager, there's something even scarier about that, which might be irrational. But so.
Oh, it's not irrational. I am terrified of children, like whether they're murderers or not. So I'm with you.
In general, I'm not terrified of children, but but yeah, the ones that like are a little dead behind the eyes, that's yeah. So I looked into this, sort of continuing with the thread of, a child who, and I'm using child to mean like pretty much everybody younger than me, but especially under 18, who causes the death of another person. So in the story last week, the person who ended up going to prison for the longest time was not actually the murderer, but was a child who was convicted of murdering another. But the actual killer, whose name I have decided to forget, was at the time also a teenager. So totally counts. So this is a story that probably everybody knows a little bit of something about. I know that when I was researching it today, like the thing that stuck out the most was not even the names, but it was the eyebrows. So if you look at photos of Michelle Carter, she is very memorable looking. And actually, as I was Googling her earlier, and I was, just kind of looking through, like, let me get all the dates and all the places. And one of the top, if you start typing in her name, Google predicts that you might want to look up information about her eyebrows as, like, the third option. So Conrad Roy was 18 years old. He lived in Massachusetts. He had a history of mental illness. He had been prescribed several different psychiatric drugs. He had a history of depression, and it was actually what brought him and Michelle together, because they both struggled with depression and had visited therapists and all of this kind of thing. And so they were in a kind of long distance relationship that consisted mostly of texting. And so the week before his death, he had for some time been suicidal. He had had different suicide attempts, lots of kind of suicide attempts that were maybe a little bit more cry for help than actually I want to die right now. Like there's a lot of, I'm, going to kill myself, but I'm going to stop and change my mind last second and try to, so he wasn't, I feel like that's even more sad because it wasn't like, hey, I want to die right now. It was like, I don't know what to do to get help. And this is the only thing I can think of. So, which just makes the whole thing so much more tragic that Michelle was in his life at all.
Yeah.
So the week before he did eventually kill himself, he and Michelle Carter, who was 17 at the time, exchanged over 1,000 texts back and forth, and a lot of it had to do with his depression and whether or not he was going to end his life. But the most notable texts that are involved in this case occurred the day of his death, because on July 13th, 2014, he started his car. He had it fill up with carbon monoxide, essentially, so sort of like what I learned, and was attempting to commit suicide. And in the middle of it, had a change of heart or a panic or whatever, and stopped, left the car, and texted his girlfriend, who, in everyone's normal life, would have then called 911, right? Sought help, tried to talk him down, called a family member, something. No, not so much. Instead, she texted him, and I have the actual texts here, and it's awful. You can't think about it. You just need to do it, Conrad. The more you push it off, the more it will eat at you. No more waiting. If you want it as bad as you say you do, it's time to do it today. You're finally going to be happy in heaven. No more pain. It's okay to be scared. It's normal. I mean, you're about to die.
Oh, fuck her.
Yeah. So this was part of the story that, I knew she had said things. I knew she'd encouraged him. I knew that she definitely shares some blame and all. I had no idea it was that pointed. Taunting him, if you want it as bad as you say you do.
That's awful.
Awful, and monstrous. So
why can't people call 911 is our lesson for today. Call 911,
right.
People.
Yeah, no. God. If you cannot deal with this, and you can't, there are professionals.
Yeah.
So that worked. And because I assumed it was intended to send him right back into the car, which it did, and he killed himself. Just after he killed himself, she realized that this may have not been a good idea. Surprise, surprise. She became very concerned that people were going to think poorly of her when they found these texts on his phone. Specifically his family, they might not like her anymore.
Well, I don't like her, so I mean.
Right. Can you imagine, though? the lack of awareness that leads you to be concerned that his family might not like you after sending that text.
Right. Yeah. You're more thinking about yourself than the person who just killed themselves because you told them to.
Right. Right. Well, she was also very concerned she might go to jail. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's...
Okay. Again,
yeah.
Me first.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Yep. Mm-hmm. So she, because she is a brilliant person, texted her friends that she was concerned about these things. So now it's in writing, you know, I could go to jail. What's going to happen to me? Like, they're going to hate me. Just all of this super self-absorbed nonsense. And so she was arrested when they found the phone and read the texts and were like, yes, actually what you did is not okay. And in June of 2017, she was convicted and on August 3rd sentenced to 2.5 years in jail and 5 years probation. So...
What was the actual charge?
So the actual charge is involuntary manslaughter.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Although, so the reason that this is sort of is all over the news at the moment is because she's been appealing ever since. So if she had gone to jail in August of 2017, she would be probably getting pretty close to getting out, especially with whatever the good time rules are in Massachusetts. And I know in Virginia, you only serve 80% of your sentence and less if you go to prison. And she would probably, but no, she's never been to jail because she's been appealing ever since and out on bail. This month, her latest appeal ended and the judge essentially said, you know, you're disgusting. Like this is absolutely unacceptable. Like, of course you have to go to jail. And he really talked a lot about that she didn't do anything to prevent her boyfriend's death, and less so about she actively encouraged his death, which I think is even more horrific. But he said, you know, even without that, you knew this was happening. You had a conversation with him, you encouraged it, and then you didn't contact anyone. You didn't make any attempt to prevent him from killing himself. So you are culpable in this situation.
Yeah, good on him.
Yeah, absolutely. So her sentence stands. It is still only 2.5 years, which is nothing.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. And then 5 years probation, which is nothing.
Yeah.
The attorney general is moving for her sentence to be enforced already. Like, it has been a year and a half. It is time for her to actually go to prison for a little while, now that 2 different judges have upheld the sentence. But her attorneys are considering taking it to the Supreme Court with another appeal.
What?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Basically, on the basis of it wasn't her responsibility to do anything about it, and all she did was text him, and it's not her fault.
Ugh. What a fucking waste of the legal system's time.
Right?
She's not even being given that much of a harsh punishment for what she did. My God. Serve your time and shut up.
Right? Be so insanely grateful that you didn't get what you deserved.
Right.
In that situation. And I mean, I realize she did not travel there and force him to commit suicide, and she didn't in any way actively physically harm him, but she knew exactly what those texts were going to do, and that was her intention. And I feel like that is just as much a weapon as a physical weapon. I feel like she should have gotten in so much more trouble than she did. Yeah,
and clearly her motivation is seen in the events after the fact, because if someone texts me, I'm going to kill myself, and I text back yeah, do it, jokingly.
Right.
It's not the same as what she did, which is that long text that is encouraging it over and over and over again. And then after the fact, trying to cover her own ass.
Right.
Because she knows what she did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and too, with your example, I mean, there are some people in my life who, if they texted me that, I would be concerned. But for the majority of people, I would not take that seriously just out of the blue.
Yeah.
She knew he was suicidal, knew for a fact, and had the context that he was in the middle of trying to kill himself. when this text came. So there's no excuse. There's no like, I didn't know it would have this effect, or I didn't intend this. No, absolutely. Yeah. And then trying to cover your tracks afterward, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no.
Like the self-defense in your story, right? If you go and then you wash off the blood and you hide your clothes, it wasn't self-defense.
Right. Like, if you did not call the police after someone died and your first reaction is, I'm going to run away and get rid of the evidence.
Right.
Your self-defense just went out the window.
Right.
So,
any sort of plausible deniability at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, absolute monster and really terrifying, and also dead behind the eyes. Like, the eyebrows are upsetting, but just the... I can't overstate how upsetting I find her.
That's the cover photo, right? Is the eyebrows?
Oh, it's got to be. It might just be a close-up. Although you really need it. I think the eyebrows are only upsetting because the hair is bleach blonde, but the eyebrows are like almost black and also really, really straight.
Oh boy.
But yeah, no, even just her expression, like any picture where she's sad, she's just sad for herself. And she doesn't have any empathy or any remorse. She did attempt to show some remorse. I found a tweet that she posted the year he died in September, so a couple months after his death. National Suicide Awareness Day. I wish more people understood. I love you and miss you every day, Conrad. Help others. # we can end suicide.
Oh. Yeah. Nice try.
Yeah. I don't think she understands any of that.
No, I don't think she does either. I think that was something
it's a PR move.
She was doing again for herself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Or at the very least for attention. Like, I almost wonder how much of encouraging him was maybe just some sick, I have no empathy and let's see if I have this power, but also maybe just her own, like, man, if my boyfriend kills himself, everyone will have to take care of me.
Yeah, I can see that too.
So I find her absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, she's awful.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were super happy stories.
Yeah. Did we brighten your day, everyone?
Right. So,
everyone got a positive outlook now?
Right. There has to be something good out of all of this, though, right? Like, maybe even just that it is horrific and everyone knows it's horrific, and...
Yeah. It's, cue the NBC The More You Know logo. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But I did like your advice. It fits very well with our call your people and don't end up on next week's episode, but the call 911.
Seriously.
Or whatever your country's equivalent is. Like, you should know that and you should call.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like you probably, you could overuse that, but if you think you might need to call, just go ahead.
Yeah. If it's very clear that someone is dead or someone is going to kill themselves, those definitely qualify for 911 scenarios. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No, yeah, you shouldn't even have to think. But I think even in other situations, like if you're thinking, I wonder if I should, just go ahead. They are absolutely trained to sort that to the appropriate place. Yeah. So, okay, let's put all of that horribleness aside and talk about your podcast. Is that a great transition or what?
Yeah.
But it'll end on a good note.
Okay, I can try and look at it that way, I guess.
Yeah, yes. Here comes the sunny portion of the podcast, which, speaking of, I love. So we're on Skype, and your room is so bright yellow. However, I'm fairly certain Frankenstein's monster has been staring at me this entire time.
Oh, is he? Oh, yeah, there he is. Oh,
yeah. It took me a little while to realize that wasn't like some strange reflection, but it was like it's not alive, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, we converted our garage, and like if you look over there, you can kind of see like the white painted there. Like that's our projector screen.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we've got that. Plus I've got like my whole movie set up They're like all my action figures and movies and stuff. So yeah, I love horror. I love true crime. And so again, that's why I was happy to be on this with you. But
yes.
But the podcast I host customers also watched is specifically about Amazon Prime B movies. So comes out every other Tuesday. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, all the things. And what I did is I actually started with one movie on Prime that was on my own personal watch list, and then watched that, reviewed it with friends, and then from there I picked a movie from the customers also watch list. And then every time at the end of the movie, I have to pick one from that next movie's customers also watch list. So trying to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Definitely running into some garbage.
That's amazing. Do you ever watch a movie and then go, there's nothing to say about this?
No.
Or have they all been like plenty to talk about?
There's always something to say. It's hard to find good things to say about a lot of these movies.
I love it.
But we do try to find some kind of gem in each one if we possibly can. Like even the last one that I did, I was like, I hate this movie more than I've ever hated a movie, but at least they had a good Humphrey Bogart impersonator, and I will give it that. Like, that's it. So,
it's great.
Yeah. So it's been fun. I even I set up rules for myself, like no repeats. So I can't watch, if I've seen the movie, I can't pick it. It has to be available for free. And so that's kind of helped narrow down the options, because there's generally between 10 and 15 options. So I could automatically rule out, okay, I've already watched that. That one's not available for free. So yeah, it's been fun, and it's been mostly horror movies so far, but hopefully soon I'll be able to beat the algorithm and get over into the sci-fi genre.
Right. You just have to, it's like playing the degrees of wiki or whatever, right? Where you have to go through. So do you announce at the end of the current episode, the next one I'm going to watch is, so everybody can play along?
Yeah. So I actually pick during the episode. I will pull up the customers also watch list at the end of the episode and go through it. And then I will make my pick right then and there for the next one. So it commits me to it. So one of the other rules is I can't look at anything outside of the list. I can't look at reviews or anything else like that, like IMDb or anything. So I have to pick it just based on the description of the movie itself. Maybe the poster art or the runtime or whatever.
Right. That was going to be my next question is so what is it that actually influences you to choose your next movie? Is it the cover art? Is it the description? Is it the actors? Is it the...
It's kind of a combination of all of those things. I haven't run into one where the actor has pulled me in. But it's generally been, there's one that I picked was one that I'd heard of before and had been meaning to watch. So I was like, cool, bonus. And that one didn't turn out so great. But I mean, the episode was fine, except for the audio, but
I hate that.
Yeah.
It's always my worst fear every time.
Yeah. But I did, the last one that came out, I picked it because it looked like it was going to be a horror movie about a killer clown. And then it turned out to be a comedy, where the clown was Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley. And I totally got duped by the poster. I was mad. I was like, what is this? So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite movie that you've done an episode on?
I think I just recorded one episode with my husband and his best friend, which, and I'm not picking favorites because it was my husband. The movie was legitimately, charming and probably one of the better movies that I'd seen. That was called Twice Dead, and that's the next episode that'll be coming out, not this week, but next. And then I think the first episode I really enjoyed because I had a couple of gal friends and we were watching this horror movie called Curtains, which is kind of like an adult slasher movie, and it passed the Bechdel test. So I was like, this movie's great, except, it has its flaws, but we were all like, this is a movie that begs to be remade, because that's the scale that I actually use for recommendations. is you either love it, leave it, remake it, or kill it with fire.
Nice.
And I've killed 2 with fire so far and left 1, remade a couple, and in my head for recommendations. I have not loved 1 yet, so I hope to find that soon.
Right. So do your favorite episodes align with the movies you enjoyed the most, or do you like the ones that like seriously bomb? And
I mean, I had a really good time doing the episode for Microwave Massacre because I hated that movie so much.
Microwave Massacre?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was a great episode, but I hated that movie and I wanted to kill it with fire.
Yeah.
So I think it works both ways. Like, so I think my favorites are pretty much more about the movies themselves, but,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you like just watch tons of movies all the time, or do you find yourself pretty much just watching for your episode, like now as your general TV watching habits?
Yeah. No, I watch a pretty good mix of both. I mean, I have a, you know, pretty extensive collection, so I'm still getting caught up. Getting caught up on a lot of other movies. Like I try to limit my bad movie exposure to just for the podcast so I don't get overwhelmed and burnt out.
Sure.
So, but yeah, no, I still, you know, I still watch a lot of other movies and keep track of them on Letterboxd, so I don't, you know, lose track of anything. I actually, because of my physical inventory, that's the whole reason I got Letterboxd, was so I could make a list and keep track of all the movies that I own, so I would stop buying duplicates.
Nice. Love it. That is awesome. That sounds like so much fun to do.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Neat. So do you have any social media, website, whatever that you would like to pimp?
Sure. So Facebook and Instagram under Customers Also Watched. Twitter is CAW Podcast. Or even for those of you who are also on Letterboxd. I know we're few and far between, but username on there is Also Watched.
Also Watched. Yeah. Awesome. I'm so excited. I'm going to have to go listen. That sounds like a great, it's like, I guess pouring is not the right, there is lots of snow happening outside my window right now. So yeah, listening to a podcast about bad horror movies sounds like a great afternoon. Pretty sure there's some Baileys and coffee happening in my kitchen.
Nice.
Sounds great.
Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for your help this week.
Of course.
This was a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Call 911.
Yes. Call 911. Call your people.
Yes.
Don't end up on next week's episode. Feel like those are pretty basic points that are not asking too much.
Yes.
You can follow Crime Crazy on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/crimecrazypod. From there, catch up on the conversation by joining one of 2 of the Crime Crazy groups. You can follow us on Twitter at Crime Crazy Pod. You can follow us on Instagram at Crime Crazy Pod. You can visit our website at crimecrazypodcast.com or email us at crimecrazypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us individually on Twitter. You're at
Eryn Plime.
I'm at Diana_Seacon. And on Instagram, you're at
Eplime.
And I'm at Diana_Seacon.